The new canon for the Star Wars universe keeps expanding, and it can be a little daunting for any Star Wars fan to keep track of. The last 3 years have provided some great new additions to the Star Wars mythology. Everything hasn't hit the mark, but enough material has been good or great to keep me coming back for more. 2016 saw a plethora of new material in all forms released, and I wanted to do a rundown of everything that came out in the year. I'm going to try to touch on everything new that was released during the year, but we'll be omitting any retellings of previous canon material. For example, I won't be mentioning the comic that came out based on The Force Awakens, which was released in 2016. This being said, everything else is fair game, even if I haven't read it or watched it. I pulled my information from Wookieepedia and their canon timeline, and then tried to cross-reference their material with other sites. Wookieepedia by far had the most extensive list, and I'll put a link to their page in the description below. I'm going to go through the list of everything released in 2016 in Star Wars chronological order, not the order it was released during the year. To start off is a short story, which is contained in the Star Wars anthology book, Tales from a Galaxy Far, Far Away.
Aliens, Volume 1. The story is a recipe for death, and takes place in Maz Kanata's castle. I have yet to dive into the story, because this release eluded me. Most of the other stories in the anthology book came out last year as electronic ebooks leading up to The Force Awakens. I missed a few of the new ones which were released solely in this anthology edition. I hope we start to get more anthology novels. Some of the best stories ever to be released in what is now Legends came out of the anthology books, namely Tales from Jabba's Palace and Bounty Hunter Tales. I hope more of these stories are written and compiled to grow the mythos of the universe. The next release is in the Star Wars main comic line, and was the last issue to be released before the new year. Some of Star Wars number 26 takes place before the events of The Phantom Menace, as Obi-Wan Kenobi recounts a tale of Yoda in his journal. I was extremely excited for this release, because we were getting to see a younger Yoda on an adventure. I was a tad let down in this issue overall, but it was more of a setup to the rest of the story to come, so my hopes are still high on this upcoming run of issues. The first true prequel new canon material was released this year in the form of the Obi-Wan and Anakin comic. It told the story of an adventure with Obi-Wan and Anakin on a remote world which was embroiled in a civil war. It was an okay story, nothing truly spectacular, but what stood out in the comic was the establishment of the relationship between Palpatine and Anakin, told through flashbacks in the issues. These flashbacks were worth picking up the comic if you are a canon junkie. The entire 5-issue run is now available to pick up in trade paper. Catalyst is one of the 5 major novels released this year if you count the novelization of Rogue One. The novel takes place over a large amount of time, spanning from the end of Episode 2 through the rise of the Empire. It is a fantastic companion piece to Rogue One, and if you are at all a fan of the movie and haven't picked it up, do yourself a favor and read or listen to Catalyst. It greatly enhances the viewing experience of Rogue One by expanding on the backstory between Krennic and Galen, along with Krennic's power struggle against Tarkin. It highlights why Tarkin was in so much of Rogue One. The novel just makes Rogue One better. No simpler way to put it. The Canon comics finished their run this year with issues 10 through 12. They spanned some time with the Rebels crew, along with Kanan's early life after he left the Jedi Order and was hiding from the Empire. It was a good series, and any fans of the Rebels show should pick up the entire run of comics. I don't know if you can get all 12 issues in one trade paper book, but it would be worth buying the 2 versions if that's how they come. A few of the comics tie directly into a couple of the episodes for the show. This was a fun, enjoyable comic, but if you aren't watching Rebels, you could probably skip it. A book series I haven't checked out yet, because it's for younger kids, are the Adventures in Wild Space books. I don't know anything about them, but I might pick up a few and read them to my 5-year-old just to see if the stories are worth adding to the Star Wars universe. There are 5 books currently in the series, with 2 more set to be released in 2017. I'm not above reading junior books if they are good stories. A book which I'm sure the showrunner of the Clone Wars and Rebels, Dave Filoni, pushed hard for was Ahsoka. The book shows how Ahsoka gets engaged in the rebellion and also provides some interesting information on kyber crystals and why Sith lightsabers are red. I don't know if I necessarily like this addition to canon. It felt more like a midichlorian edition rather than what Lucasfilm has been doing. This wasn't a book I loved, and I'm not sure I will ever revisit it, but for fans of the character from the Clone Wars and Rebels, it is worth checking out. The novel does a good job of bridging the gap between the character she was at the end of Clone Wars to what she is during Rebels. Here is an addition to canon I had no idea existed until I started compiling this list. The magazine, Star Wars Insider, has canon short stories published in issues. 2 editions to come out this year are The Voice of the Empire and TK 146275. Canon short stories have been coming out in the magazine since the new canon has been released. Once I found the magazine had canon material, I put in a subscription. Hopefully an anthology work will be published with the material so more can have access. At the very least, I hope some ebooks are released with these short stories. There were 2 Obi-Wan Kenobi issues to be released in the main Star Wars comic line this year. The issues were 15 and 20, and if you want some great one-off titles to pick up, I can't recommend these enough. If you want an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, I think these stories are a testing ground for what a film could be. There are only 4 issues to date set apart from the main comic line, with the adventures of Obi-Wan, but each are worth reading and some of the best issues of the series. There is a Star Wars Rebels magazine, which has comic strips inserted in it, which are apparently canon. This is the second instance of me not knowing certain canon material existed. This is the only time I am questioning the Wookieepedia timeline. I just don't know if these should be included in canon. Maybe they add to the adventures of the Rebels crew, but with titles such as Puffer Problems, I can't imagine they add much other than comic relief. If anyone out there has read these, let me know if they are worth reading. I won't be subscribing to the magazine for these comic strips, but hopefully I won't be missing out on too much. There were quite a few of the comic strips released this year if anyone is interested in checking them out in the magazine. The second half of Season 2 of Star Wars Rebels and the first half of Season 3 were released in 2016, and I have been pleased with both. I do have some issues with the pacing of the show and some of the filler episodes which seem to slow down the major arcs, but Rebels always pulls me back in with a fantastic episode or 2. I hope the pacing improves for the second half of Season 3, and we get more of Thrawn and maybe the introduction of Obi-Wan, which I guess with the Season 3 trailer that was released today is a certainty. I thought the second season closed out strong, and the first few episodes of the season were excellent. The show tailed off a bit during Season 3, but the mid-season finale was great, and the first few episodes of 2017 look good. This leads us into Rogue One. The film is great, and if you're watching this, I'm guessing you have seen it. The novelization is also really well done. I suggest the audiobook. It adds to the Tarkin vs. Krennic power struggle. It also shows in more detail how Galen implemented his flaw in the construction of the Death Star. I've said my piece about this in a couple of other videos, but I actually like some of the explanation in this book. It was a really well written novelization. It was written by the same author who wrote Battlefront Twilight Company, Alexander Freed, which I didn't enjoy as much as I hoped to, but this was a strong second effort. We are now up to the main trio's timeline. The Star Wars main comic line went from issues 14 to 26, and minus the 2 Kenobi issues and the one with Yoda, the events are set after Star Wars A New Hope, but before the Alliance ends up on Hoth. I have enjoyed nearly all of the issues this year, and can't really think of one I have disliked. They are fun reads, and if you want to jump into reading comics, this or the Darth Vader comic are the 2 I would suggest picking up to start. The Darth Vader comic finished up this year with issues 13 through 25, plus a one-shot called Vader Down. The Vader comic was a little bit of a roller coaster with content, but overall it was an enjoyable read. It was at its best when it was showing Vader doing amazing things. Just think about the ending of Rogue One and you get the idea. The entire series is available in 2 different volumes, and I would recommend any fan picking them up. If nothing else, pick up the Vader Down crossover event with the main Star Wars comic line. There is a trade paper available of these combined issues, and it is very much worth the read. For everyone still feeling the sting of losing Carrie Fisher, I would recommend picking up the second Star Wars annual comic. It is very much Princess Leia centric, and is a very good read. I enjoyed the issue, and how it showed Leia in a more vulnerable light, and also how much she is willing to risk for the rebellion. It is another instance of the Lucasfilm story group graying up the rebellion, instead of making them the clean-cut good guys. I think this is something the new canon has done remarkably well, and I hope it continues. A comic series I didn't know what to expect from was Dr. Aphra. She was introduced in the Darth Vader comic series, and I went from both liking and disliking the character. I have enjoyed the first 2 issues of the series. I still don't know if I like the character, but I like where the story is going, and what it is introducing. If anyone is a fan of the Legends Jedi Academy stories by Kevin J. Anderson, I would suggest you pick up Dr. Aphra. I won't say much more than this to not spoil anything, but the series might be pulling loosely from those Legends books about events on a certain planet. Even if I don't love the character of Aphra, I like the expansion of the lore and history in the universe, and the series is doing this. A series everyone who is reading the comics was looking forward to was the Han Solo series. It was a short run of 5 issues, and overall it was well done. The author, Marjorie Lee, nailed Han as a character. The race adventure to help smuggle a rebel spy back to the rebellion was also exciting, but the last few issues were a little anticlimactic. It didn't focus as much on Han as it did another character introduced, and it hurt the series overall. I still liked the books, but was hoping for just a bit more. Han Solo isn't my favorite character, so I'm interested to see what others thought of the book, if he is. All 5 issues are now available in a trade paper edition if you want to pick it up. A short story from Star Wars Insider is next, called Turning Point. It is set after Return of the Jedi and ties into the second Chuck Wendig Aftermath novel. The first Aftermath novel is not a favorite of mine, but I'm glad I read it because of Wendig's second effort. Life Debt is a good addition to canon and sets up some major reveals for the universe overall. I would recommend people reading or listening to the first book so they can enjoy the second. I think part of the issue with the first Aftermath were the expectations heaped upon it. The novel didn't continue the adventures of the main characters or even side characters from the original trilogy, which I think turned some fans off. Regardless, the second novel is much better all around, and I'm looking forward to the third installment, which will come out in 2017. 2 more short stories from Star Wars Insider are next chronologically: Blade Squadron Kuat and Scorched. Again, hopefully these are made available in other forms eventually, but I'm going to personally try and get the back issues of Star Wars Insider to read them. My most anticipated novel for 2016 was Bloodline, after I finished reading Claudia Gray's first Star Wars novel, Lost Stars, which was released in 2015. Gray did not disappoint in her sophomore effort, and Bloodline is a fantastic political thriller. The book does a fantastic job of showing the state of the New Republic before the events of Force Awakens, and ties into the film fantastically, much the same way Catalyst does for Rogue One. Bloodline enriches The Force Awakens by expanding relationships and explaining why Leia is the leader of a small resistance group and not part of the Republic. I wasn't sure I liked the setup for the major turn in the novel, but it makes overall sense for the Star Wars universe. If you are a fan of political intrigue of any kind, this is a must-read. Even if you aren't, and you are just a fan of The Force Awakens, I would suggest picking up Bloodline. The book is also very much focused on Leia, and after losing Carrie Fisher, it helps to imagine her in the role going on this adventure. I plan on reading/listening to this one again very soon. The canon material for 2016 is almost bookended by short stories in the anthology book Tales from a Galaxy Far, Far Away. The other story in the novel not released as an ebook last year is True Love and is about Unkar Plutt. I look forward to reading about the junk dealer who ended up with the Millennium Falcon, and hope the story tells how he ended up with the vessel. The story takes place before the events of Force Awakens, so I'm hoping to see how he got his hands on the iconic ship. An appearance by Rey would also be a welcome addition in the story. The long-delayed C-3PO comic was released in April of 2016 after it was initially supposed to be released before The Force Awakens. If anyone cares to read about how C-3PO ended up with his red arm in the film, then this is the comic for you. It is not a good read, and I plowed through it as fast as I could. I have it, and I read it, but that is all I can say about this one-shot comic. I'm glad they didn't decide to make this a short-run series. The final additions chronologically to Star Wars canon are the Poe Dameron comic series. Issue 1 through 9 were released in 2016. I was extremely excited when they announced this comic, because there is very little material about the time leading up to The Force Awakens. Poe is a great character from the movie, and I was excited to read more about him. The comic, however, has been a letdown overall for me. The series has a very Saturday morning cartoon vibe, and the writing has been some of the poorest of any canon material. The last issue showed some major promise, and gave some interesting backstory to what has become the main villain of the comic. I hope it continues to improve, because for some reason, I will keep buying and reading it.
This is it. Everything which came out in 2016 for Star Wars Canon. This is a bunch of material, and more is coming in 2017 for Star Wars fans. It is a little daunting to keep straight, and there was material that I wasn't even aware of before doing research for this video. Comment and let me know what your favorite piece of canon from 2016 was, and what you were most looking forward to in 2017, excluding Episode 8. My most anticipated has to be the return of Timothy Zahn and his Thrawn novel. I can't wait to read/listen to that book. Like, share, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. Thanks for watching.